I didn't know if it was important.
It should be. All right, it's just past 8, so we're gonna get started here in a minute. Just a couple random things. I want to thank everybody for coming and thank everybody in advance for having patience as I probably fumble through Zoom. So if I am having issues and you're thinking to yourself, just press that button, dummy. You can just come up here and help me press that button instead of watching me struggle. Everybody on Zoom, if you can just try to stay muted, that would be great. Our first presenter today is Anthony Hatcher. Anthony has been working for the Police Conservation District for 4 years, where he works on a variety of projects, including farm and ranch planning, riparian restoration, prairie restoration, and monitoring. Prior to coming to Blue City, he spent 8 years working for various state and federal conservation agencies in rangeland management, habitat restoration, and field botany. And Anthony is going to give us a presentation today on vegetation monitoring.
All right, hey, thanks, Drew, for that introduction. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming this morning to watch this presentation on vegetation monitoring and how we've been going about things at Police Conservation District. Yeah, like Drew said, I've been with the district 4.5 years. Started as a research and monitoring technician, then went to a planner position, and now I'm a conservation coordinator. And wear a lot of different hats, but one of the fun things I get to do is for a short time during the summer, do some vegetation monitoring on our riparian restoration projects. And with that, I'm gonna share my screen here and get started. And if you can't see that, let me know. Yep, so just here's a couple of, start off with some nice pictures of some of our recent projects. Yeah, what we've been doing. These are 2 different projects we have in the area. Just kind of start off to let you know a little bit about the Palouse. On the left is one that's actually up on the Palouse, deep soils, silt loam, not too rocky along the banks, very silty, sediment heavy streams. And then on the right, there's one of our newer projects down in Septo Canyon, which is along the Snake River Breaks, much different type area, drier, a lot rockier, more steep gradient streams through there. So just an overview before we get going of what this presentation is going to cover. Just going to start off talking about our monitoring program and how we developed it, kind of why we went about wanting to know some of this information about our projects, and then kind of the why we were thinking when we first started this back in 2018 is when we first started coming up with these ideas and how we want to go about doing vegetation monitoring. We came up with some monitoring questions we wanted to ask, as well as some goals, what we wanted to get out of this monitoring. Then I'm going to kind of tie into that, going in the what, why, how, and when of monitoring. So just kind of the whole, what are we collecting? Why are we collecting it? When are we collecting it? Then I'll go into our methodology and the schedule we do for our different projects. And we kind of, at different phases throughout the life of a project, we'll do different protocols. And I'll talk about those protocols that we use, as well as some information on about our data collection methods and how we manage that data. And then lastly, I'll talk about, will this work for your district if you're interested in doing this type of monitoring? So just a little bit of history. One of the reasons we wanted to start doing this vegetation monitoring is that we had a lot of new projects go on the ground since 2015. We received RCPP grant from the USDA in the Palouse watershed. And we had several Washington Department of Ecology water quality grants all at the same time. So starting in 2015, the district started growing really rapidly, not only in we have a lot of employees come on, but we also had a lot more projects going on the ground. So with all these new projects on the ground, we're thinking, what's the best way we can go about making these projects successful? Kind of prior to vegetation monitoring, we did a lot of photo points, so we had that monitoring, and then we had a lot of anecdotes about plant survival. We always knew Syringa never did very well on our projects for some reason, and then we were doing SVAPs at the same time as part of our initial inventory, but we weren't really delving too deeply into monitoring our projects and kind of gathering information that can help us learn more about how to make more successful projects in the future. And we also were kind of interested in what are they having the desired outcome on the landscape we want to have. We have a pretty robust research and monitoring program at the district that focuses mostly on water quality monitoring. So we were kind of gathering information on that aspect of our projects, but we didn't know too much about habitat in terms of structure with these projects, how that was impacting wildlife species, or it had the potential to impact them, as well as some just kind of basic information about, are we having these desired effect of changing plant communities over time from these really altered ecosystems that we have on the Palouse and our riparian areas to more of a natural, better functioning system. So in 2018, we began the research conservation staff and research and monitoring staff to put together a set of questions that we wanted to answer through vegetation monitoring, and the goals we wanted to achieve through that monitoring, what we wanted to collect, and how we wanted to collect that information. So we started putting together monitoring methodologies and protocols. In 2018 and early 19, we tested some of those protocols in the field. Some of those protocols we ended up dropping because they were just too complicated, too time consuming. And then in summer of 19, we kind of had everything together and we started doing our monitoring in earnest. So the monitoring questions we kind of came up with and talked about, there was how are our efforts changing plant communities over time? This is kind of a long-term idea, long-term question. And as I go through these, you'll see there's these kind of two different categories of questions I think about. There's kind of the long-term aspect of monitoring and seeing what changes are happening long-term. And then there's more of the short-term, which is focused more on kind of your survival, which species are doing well, which species aren't. So that's the kind of the second question there. Third question we kind of wanted to know is some information about our management practices. Although every project is completely different, there's different pressure from herbivores. There's the water flows can be different. Are there some ways that some of these management practices that promote project success, just whether it's that one project or kind of you can lump them together and say all these practices really help, and how are we implementing them in a way that is promoting a project success? Another question we do, are we meeting funding agency requirements? Yeah, as you all know, every funding agency has different information they want out of your projects. We also have, with RCPP, we're fortunate that we have a lot of maintenance funds for these projects. So we also thought, is there a way with our monitoring and the information we gather that we can target maintenance funds projects that maybe need more maintenance, aren't doing as well? And then the projects that are doing really well, let's try to spend less money on that. And, to really answer that question and to know, for certain, the vegetation monitoring we thought could help us figure that out. And then finally, we want then the big question overall, I think, of any monitoring is, are our restoration efforts having the desired effect on the landscape we want them to have? So with these questions, we came up with some overall goals, very overarching, of kind of what we wanted our monitoring program to look like. The kind of number one thing is that we figured out, and I think that most everyone in this who's a restoration practitioner wants to know, is these like effectiveness and question-based monitoring is what you're really striving for. We're not trying to write research papers with this information. We just want to use this information to help us put better projects on the ground and to improve the projects we already have on the ground. And that really ties into, we're not collecting data for the sake of collecting data. We really want to use this information for practical purposes. And this is a little bit of my background. Before I came to the district, I worked many seasonal jobs for various federal agencies, doing a lot of vegetation monitoring, a lot of rangeland health monitoring, riparian area monitoring. And at the end of those field seasons, they would put all the data you collected into a book, and they'd close it up and they'd put it on a shelf. And it would sit there until someone came along to either sue the Forest Service, the BLM, or there was someone had a question. And really, I felt like the only reason we were monitoring those cases was to keep the agency from being sued, because they wrote into their management plans, we will monitor. And I really didn't want to go down that rabbit hole. I really wanted to use this data for important purposes. Another big goal with our monitoring is we want it to be flexible. With district world, there's always changes in workload and staffing, and we wanted to make this a workable methodology that wasn't too overbearing, that people with kind of different skill sets and different amount of time to invest in these projects could go out and complete this. So with our questions set up and the goals, then we kind of turn to what do we want to collect to answer some of these questions we had. And what we came up with, or what we wanted to know, were stems per acre, survival of our species we're planting, some habitat structure, so height of the plants, canopy cover, plant vigor, competition, mostly in our area, reed canary grass and other grasses is our main form of competition for our plants. Herbivory, pressure on the plants, and then some longer term things we collect as information on our riparian plant community composition, Greenland plant community composition, Greenline plant community composition, and we also collect information on the management practices we're implementing. So why collect this data? So funding agency requirements is one thing that I know Department of Ecology wants to know stems per acre. They want to know survival, as does the PrEP program. We want to know information about the current project. So best way to gather that is we got information about survival, plant vigor of what we planted, competition, herbivory, management practice information. We want to know information about ways to improve future projects. So collecting that same information on the current project lets you know how we made this decision to plant these species. They didn't do too well. This other project is, right downstream, same area. Let's not make that same mistake again. Or, hey, we didn't put any tree tubes on these trees and the beavers just came and destroyed these, or the deer just had a field day with these. This next project in the same area, let's not make that same mistake. And then we also collect this data to see our desired changes on the landscape over time. So that's why we've been collecting information on riparian plant community composition, Greenline plant community composition, canopy cover, and structure. So how do we go about collecting all this data? Well, we use basically 3 different protocols. We use, and I'll get into all the details of all these later. So we use forest density plots, and that you get a surprisingly large amount of information from those. And they're actually pretty quick to do once you get going on them. We use a step point intercept cross sections to look at our plant community composition across our riparian areas and project areas. And that also gets us some more information about stems per acre. And then what we use protocols to look at our green line and then look at the plant communities along our green line and the woody species along there. So when do we collect this? Just typically height of the growing season. We've been doing it till late May to June, but you can do it later. We typically try to wrap it up by the end of June because after that things start to get pretty crispy and a little harder to identify. And so for efficiency purposes, we put our more time-consuming protocols, which are our riparian cross sections, the green line, and the SVAP, and I'll get onto all these later. We do those at the baseline, year 5 to 10 and year 15. And then our less time-consuming protocols, we do more often, especially early in the practice life. And those are kind of our density plots and our photo points. And those tell us a little more information about how the project is doing. So that's where we get a lot of our survival information and stems per acre information. And so it's called the vegetation monitoring schedule, but it's also kind of the methodology we've been going about. So it just has our different protocols that we use there on the left, and then what year in the practice life we were doing those. So like I said on the last slide, the more intensive ones, and more time consuming, which are the riparian cross sections, the green line, the SVAP, we do those not as often. So year baseline, year 0, year 5 to 10, we say year 5 to 10, that's part of that flexibility that's built into this. Maybe year 5, you're just swamped, you can't get out there to do that. So you got a 5-year period to do that. And then year 15 at the end of the practice life. We have not had any projects to get to year 15 yet, at least that we've monitored. And then some of these others, so the density methods, we do those the first 3 years, baseline the first 3 years. And you can see there's kind of some if statements written into that. So those forest density plots, if there's no woody species present at the site you're reading that baseline year, it's why look at it, just make a note that there's nothing present. And then year 3, if it's needed, if your project's doing really great, you had 80-90% survival, you have your stems per acre, everything's just hunky-dory with the site, you don't even need to do year 3. And the riparian cross sections, there's also an if statement written in there. If appropriate, on baseline year 1, if you're going into a crop field, you're planting an area where that was cropped right next to the stream, a riparian cross section isn't going to give you much information on your baseline year 1. You're just going to have wheat over and over again for the plants you're seeing and the plant communities that you're seeing. And then the SVAP, of course, that's it's pretty standard part of the 9-step planning process, doing inventory. Do that at baseline, and then year 5 to 10, year 15. And of course, photo points, they're easy. You can do those every single year, every single time you visit a site. So starting off, just the next few slides, I'm just going to go into detail about our protocols and what they are, how to do them, kind of get in the weeds a little bit here. So density plots, like I said, with our schedule, we read them at the baseline if woody species are present, year 1. And year 1 is a little flexible in that if we plant a project in the fall, year 1 would be that following spring. If we plant it in the spring, year 1, if we plant it in the fall, that year 1 would be that following summer. If we plant in the spring, it's also that following summer. And then year 2 of the project, year 3 if needed. And these plots, they're pretty basic, but you can get a lot of information about them. They're circular plots. Each one is 1/100th of an acre. So as you can see there's some of our AmeriCorps interns reading one of these plots just last week. So you just take your forestry pole, put it in the middle, and then run a logger tape out 11.8 feet or 13.6 meters, go in a circle, identify all the woody species you see, record their height and the vigor for each plant. If any natural regeneration is occurring, we record that as well. And that's just, you know, if you have some suckers from a choke cherry or some suckers from a cottonwood tree or some water shoots coming up, we record that. And that's usually for natural things. We usually don't see that. Well, in our older plots, we will see some natural regen from our older trees that we planted. Canopy cover is recorded for each plot, as well as any browse pressure, so herbivory on the plants, just kind of the average overall. We give it a score, which I'll show you later. And then also plant competition is recorded, an average for the entire plot. And so this information collected tells us important information about survival, habitat structure, stems per acre, competition, and herbivory to help planners adaptively manage their projects. So the number of plots we read per project site depends on the size of the project. Projects less than 30 acres, we look at 2% of the project area. So again, those each density plot is 1/100 of an acre. So you add those up and you get 2% of the project area. If it's greater than 30 acres, 1% is sampled. And if the project is less than 1/4 acre, it's basically one big plot. We count all the trees in there and we record them. Plot locations are randomly mapped before we go out there, and I've set up a ArcGIS model that will put the appropriate amount of points and depending on the project size into that polygon and space them out correctly. And to get your stems per acre at the end of it, you simply get the average number of woody stems you countered and you multiply that by 100. And these are pretty standard plots, but it's kind of a mash, or standard forest density plots, but it's kind of a mashup of some different protocols that are out there in the literature that we put together. And so this is what you end up with after you read these plots. I like these because they're simple, they're pretty quick, and you get a lot of information. So as you can see on here, we have our species, how many we encountered, their heights, vigor, woody percent cover, our grass code, which is our competition code, browse, which is herbivory pressure. And then you also have information about, you know, how are these plants looking? Are they stressed? Are they dead? Are they vigorous? So, and then here is just a little bit, this is, if you're curious about how we measure these things, there's our dead, stressed, and vigorous, and it's pretty, we don't get too much in the weeds of this. There's some protocols that have very particular, if such amount of canopy is dead or dying back, it's moderately stressed or it's severely stressed. We keep it simple, just dead, stressed, or vigorous. And then we have our different codes for our ground cover competition, browse damage. We don't use brush competition in our area. That's a standard one you'll see on some other protocols, but that's not really something we ever deal with in our projects. Usually the places we are planting have none or very few woody species or brush to even start with. We also have our visual estimates of canopy cover. This is really useful. I find myself referring to this a lot, especially if it's kind of a odd looking plot. I'm not quite sure how to estimate our canopy cover. And then then at the bottom, just kind of a definition of natural regen. Usually less than 20 centimeters, but sometimes you get some water shoots that are really tall and that's still natural regen. So kind of a grain of salt with those and kind of just best judgment. So next protocol, this is one of the ones that we do at the baseline, year 5 to 10 and year 15. It's a little more intensive, more time consuming. And the goal with this one is to quantify percentage of different plant communities at each project to determine changes over time due to our restoration efforts. This protocol written out pretty well in the U.S. Forest Service's National Riparian Core Protocol, but we put together some other things from the USDA out there to kind of change it a little bit for our purposes, especially because a lot of these protocols, if you look at the literature from different agencies and different people that have went out there and tried to, come up with ways to monitor riparian areas, successfully, compactly, it's all focused on natural areas. And a lot of the areas that we monitor have been so highly altered, they don't go together completely. Like the protocol from the U.S. Forest Service doesn't exactly work for an area that's been channelized and it's nothing but reed canary grass when we get started. So we put a few different protocols together to kind of make these monitoring protocols work for our purposes. So with the riparian cross sections, it's just basically identify five points along a reach of the stream that our project is in. We try to make them fairly straight. And it's just, we walk perpendicular to the valley bottom across the project area on both sides of the stream. And we count as we're walking how many steps we have in each plant community. So before we get started, we kind of meter our steps to make sure we're walking our large steps. They're approximately 1 meter each, and we usually have the same person do all 5 of these, just so we don't have some person that has tiny legs doing little tiny steps and then a person with real tall doing real big steps, and it messes with our data. So repeat this process for all the points on both sides of the stream. And yeah, with that, we can kind of calculate our percentage of plant communities. So here's just a visual example to make it a little easier to see. So this is a project site down the South Fork of the Palouse River on the left, and the purple lines there are cross sections. So we just walk across those, count our steps that are in each plant community, and then with that, we can get a percentage of plant communities within our project area. So identifying plant communities. So this is, there's a lot of different ideas about plant communities out there, but this is plant communities on a really small scale. So, and it has to be 3 meters long or 3 steps to be considered a separate plant community. And we use Crawford's 2003 publication, A Riparian Vegetation of the Columbia Basin, Washington, to determine our plant communities. But because of the degraded nature of a lot of our riparian areas in the Palouse and the prevalence of introduced species, novel community types are very present that are not recorded in Crawford. So for these, we'll kind of make up our own plant communities in a way, not make it up. We'll keep it clear and consistent so that the next person reading the plot knows like what we're referring to. So for instance, pasture grasses, we'll see a lot of that. We'll see plant communities that are smooth brome, orchard grass, meadow foxtail, some forbs in there as well. Another common one we see is perennial weeds. So with that one, we have a lot of teasel in these riparian areas, poison hemlock, Canada thistle. But to make these clear, we'll just on the data sheet, we'll just write out, introduce pasture grasses, and then the notes say this is what, by introduce pasture grasses, this is what we mean by that community. All right, so another thing we do while we're doing these cross sections, not only are we stepping off and counting the plant communities we encounter, we also have a belt transect we do. So while we're walking along these transects perpendicular to the creek or stream or river, we have a 1 meter long pole, and if on either side of that 1 meter pole, you put it on both sides of you while you're walking. So it's basically a 2 meter belt transect. If you encounter any woody species, we just count those. And this is just adds a little more information to our stems per acre. And it's really easy to do just while you're walking and counting these plant communities, doing the cross sections. Oh, and I'll go back to this one side. As you can see, here's just a data sheet from a project we read back in 21. This is pretty typical of our area, mostly. This one was mostly pasture grasses was our main plant community, and then reed canary grass was also present. And we had one black hawthorn. This was a baseline reading. So another one of the more time-consuming protocols we do in that year, or baseline, year 5 to 10, the year 15 is these Greenline protocols. And so if you're unfamiliar with it, the Greenline is defined as the first perennial vegetation that forms a lineal grouping of community types on or near the water's edge. Most likely it occurs at or slightly below bank full. And so the green line could change from season to season according to water level. So we try to do these all around the same time of year when we read these. So we determine kind of where the green line is along our project site. And once we, kind of figure out where it is, we take a tape. We start at usually cross section 0.1 that we identified in the previous protocol. And we walk 363 feet upstream or downstream at that point, just kind of depending on the project site, the layout. And then we kind of mark the end of it. So after we lay out our tape, the reader, they walk along the tape and they identify what plant communities are next to the green line. So that first set of perennial vegetation right next to the, right along the water's edge. And then we get like how many feet, does this, along the green line, does this community occupy? So we repeat this for both the left and the right banks. And again, this is plant communities on a very small scale. So for a plant community to be counted as an individual community, it has to be at least 3 meters long along the green line. So kind of just an example, if you're walking along and you have, it's all reed canary grass, but you have a small area of Baltic rush that's, you have a few plants, it's about 2 meters long. That is not a separate plant community. We'll just keep counting that as reed canary grass. And the reason we're doing this, collecting this information about Greenline plant communities, is that plant communities vary in their capacity to prevent stream bank erosion. So determining what plant communities are present along the green line at the project site can inform us how the banks will hold during high flow events. And that same publication, Crawford 2003, in addition to identifying plant communities and being a really helpful key for these, it also has your different plant communities listed in there and what their bank holding capacity is. So reed canary grass, although it's a nasty invasive that we're trying to get rid of at most of our project sites, it also has really good bank holding capacity. Not as good as woody species, but it has surprisingly good holding capacity. Whereas if you get, an area of annual grasses, of course, that's just high flow events just going to wash that away. And this is really useful to helping us know if we're having the desired effect on our plant communities over time by looking at these changes that we're seeing, especially if we're planting willows, cottonwoods, or dogwoods right along that green line. We can tell if, our plantings, over that, 15-year period, did we go from, solid reed canary grass plant communities along that to something a little more natural, like a coyote willow or some other type of community. So in addition to looking at plant communities on the green line, we also record the woody species we see along the green line. So here's the picture down at the bottom. That's one of our American members going along the stream, has a pole out 1 meter from the water. So we just record anything from the water's edge 1 meter up. And just any of these, if we see any woody species, we write them down. We put them into different height classes and then a vigor class. So we do get a little into the weeds with the different vigor classes here. But this is really important information for our knowing about how our cuttings are doing that we planted right into the banks. And the cuttings are really important for helping hold those banks together. And it also kind of helps us know about our survival. You know, a lot of time beaver will eat a lot of these cuttings, or or sometimes they just won't get planted deep enough. So this is kind of useful information we can use to see, you know, how these plantings are cutting plantings are doing, and kind of what can we do in the future to make them better. Or if we did something, if this project looks great, it's like, oh, let's try to repeat what we did here at the next project site. So the quickest and easiest are photo points, and this is done as you saw from that schedule, every single year. Really easy to do. Just mark a location, snap a photo, return the same location year after year, take the same photo and compare the photos over time. It's a good, quick, easy, qualitative method. And if you set up a pointer, let the landowner know where to take the photo, they can even take it for you and send it to you and save a trip out in the field. And this is a very successful project in Pullman down here that you can really see real drastic changes over time just through photo points. In this project, we tried to monitor this, but we'll go through it and do our density plots, and it was too thick. We couldn't even walk through it. So some of these, you have to be a little bit adaptive, and a photo point really tells you what you need to know about this project. And also the note on the monitoring sheet that says this plot was too dense to walk through lets you know that you probably don't need to spend any more time monitoring this project. It is doing very well. Another thing we do baseline year 5 to 10 and year 15 is the SFAP2. I'm not going to get into the weeds about what that is. There's whole classes and trainings on this, but this is required as part of, if you have a stream on your planning unit, it's required as inventory through the 9-step planning process of the NRCS. I find it to be fairly time consuming. And if you want more, it tells you some info. If you're not familiar with this is a protocol to assess stream condition based on stream morphology, riparian area quality and quantity, aquatic habitat, and water quality. And if you are interested in learning more about this, I've got a link to the protocol there, and you can learn more. So some other information we collect is just basic information about some of the management practices we used. There's to the right there, that is our vegetation monitoring data sheet. This is the very first page. And we just put, information about, did we use tree tubes, what type, did we use mat fabric, what type did we use, how wide was it? And this is just information that, kind of like I was talking about before, if you're doing another project in a similar area downstream and, hey, we didn't use tree tubes on this project upstream, the deer came and destroyed these plants the first year, maybe we should put tree tubes on this other one that we're doing downstream. Or we didn't use any weed mat fabric and there was too much competition, and it kind of, the trees weren't able to root well, they didn't do well. Let's not make that same mistake in another area. Or, maybe we don't need to use tree tubes. There wasn't a lot of herbivory pressure. So, all right. So putting it all together here. So once we get all this information, it gives us this nice sheet summary. So, and tells us our average, our total plots, how many trees we had, our stems per acre, canopy cover, how many plants were vigorous, stressed, or dead, our average browse code, average grass code, most common plant communities in the cross section, the green line, also breaks down the structure for us, as well as a nice pivot table here that tells us our number of live plants, the species of each, what is dead and what is stressed. So that's really useful if you're thinking, oh, this one species is not doing well. You can really see it in that table. And that's kind of, this is the kind of nuts and bolts per project of what you're getting down to and the information you're getting. So how do we collect this? We collect this all on a tablet. We start off with paper data sheets, but collecting electronically is so much quicker and easier. We have an Excel spreadsheet that really just, it makes things really easy. It was time consuming to set up on the front end, but it's really saved us time in the long run. And also, like, you, as soon as you're done monitoring, you get that nice sheet summary just instantly. So you have like that, you don't have to do any calculations. It's just right there, all the information right at your fingertips. Then at the end of the field season, once we have all our data collected from each project site, we export it and use an R script to create a master sheet for all the projects. And then from the sheet, we've kind of just dipped our toe in the water of what we can do with all this data. We've created some visual representations of the data, and you can also do a lot of statistical analysis with this. We have yet to complete any of this statistical analysis, but maybe in the future we will. You can see here's some information you can get to kind of get a real visual representation. You can see this first project down here on the bottom left. Over the years, based on year 1, year 2, stems per acre have been going up, so that's really going in the right direction. Whereas this other project on the right, you can see year 1, we had most of our plants were either vigorous or stressed that we planted, and year 2, about 50 of them died. So just looking at this, you can tell, you know, the project on the left there probably doesn't need too much more maintenance work, whereas the project on the right definitely needs some replanting. So the big question is, how much time and effort will this take, and how do you fund this? So it really varies by number of projects and the protocols being used. As you could kind of tell when I've been talking about the more time consuming protocols, especially the baseline, the more you have to do, the longer it's going to take. I didn't include what we did in 2019 on here because we were just getting started and things took a little longer. But now that we kind of got it down, this is, I feel like, pretty good representation of how long this takes. So in 2020, we had 23 projects, 8 baselines, 7 year 1 protocols, 2 year 2, 4 year 5. So the baseline's year 5, so those take longer. The year 1 or 2 don't take as long. We also had some bank stabilization projects we did Greenline on. This took us about 15 days to complete in total. And for our vegetation monitoring in 21, we had 13 projects. Only one of those was a baseline. The rest were year 1 or 2 protocols. So that went faster. And that took about 7 days to complete. And then for 2022, we had 24 projects, 10 baseline protocols. The rest were year 1, 2, and 3. That took about 11 days. And we're lucky, we have lots of interns. Right now we have 4 AmeriCorps members and 1 WSU intern, and they do a lot of the heavy lifting on this. I'll go out and train them for a couple of days, and then they'll read this. We do all of ours kind of like at one time. So there's 11 days right in a row, or there's 15 days right in a row, but you could really, depending on your, you know, how amount of time you have, you could really kind of sprinkle these in throughout the field season. And we started off in 2019, we did not have any funding for this. So it was all AmeriCorps members and interns going out reading this. And I was just kind of pulling money from where I could find it. But now we have 3 ecology grants that we wrote funding into for doing this monitoring. And our vegetation monitoring is also now an outcome for our Palouse Watershed RCPV renewal, which should be live here soon. And finally, a big question I guess you folks might want to know is, will this work for your district? It really depends on your staffing, funding, and what you want to learn from monitoring. It's definitely not going to work for all districts, especially small districts with few staff and limited funding. However, like even districts with one employee can do some sort of monitoring. Photo points are really quick and easy and can even be done by the landowner. And the forest density plots, although they might seem like a lot, you get a ton of information from those, and they're actually really fast to do once you get going. Doesn't take a lot of time whatsoever to do those once you learn what you're doing, and especially if you got a tablet set up that you can just put all the numbers in, and then it just gives you all the information right there. And if you are interested in learning more about what we've done at the Palouse Conservation District for a vegetation monitoring program, and kind of curious if it'll work at your district, or if you have an existing vegetation monitoring program you might want to incorporate some of the stuff into, feel free to email me, get in touch with me. I'd be glad to share the protocols we've put together, the SOPs, even the Excel spreadsheet we use to collect this information. So if you want to know more, just let me know. My email is there at the first slide. I'll navigate back to that in a second. And with that, here's some references we use to create the protocols if you're interested. And with that, I guess I'll take some questions.
Yeah, I'll just repeat it back to them. So if we have questions here, we've got probably five minutes or so. If anyone has questions.
The answer to the last closing, that I guess spreadsheets. Or using more of a database system for recording the data, whether in the field looking at any data collection tools and right to read.
Sure. So the question was, instead of using data sheets, using more technology, and what other, can you repeat?
Well, in the field, report digitally recording data as opposed to like right to read. So spreadsheets, some kind of a database.
Sure. So database, and what kind of field equipment you might be using to retrieve that data, Anthony?
Yeah, sure. So we use a tablet and a really robust Excel spreadsheet that our research and monitoring staff helped me put together. And yeah, we don't use paper data sheets at all anymore. It's all using the tablet, which makes, there's no more data entry at all with that. And it's really easy to just export into a master sheet at the end of the field season. We use a GPS to find our density points, our cross-section points, and before we go out in the field, that stuff's all mapped out using GIS. I have models I put together to create all that. So yeah, it's really saves a lot of time collecting data that way. And yeah, that's kind of the two pieces of technology we use. So hopefully that answers the question.
Doesn't look like we have any questions in the chat. Do we have any other questions from the room here? Yeah.
We do have a lot of sites that start as a blank canvas over being created, but we also at Pierce manage a lot of sites that already are forested conditions. They just don't have regeneration, and so we're going in, removing pieces and understory and planting for regeneration. Do you think that these methodologies are one better than the other for monitoring those conditions?
Did you catch that, Anthony?
No.
I think.
Forested condition monitoring.
Yeah. Do you think that these methods will work or are useful in monitoring a site that's already kind of forested?
The density plots definitely are. Those plots, I mean, they're made for the whole reason. I mean, they were put together in the first place was to help out with thinning projects in forests, to see if you have too many trees or too few trees in the area you're going to log. So those are definitely useful. The cross sections are also useful. I know the Forest Service uses those a lot in areas that are already forested. The Greenline, I'm not sure. I've never used that in that type of setting, but yeah, I think you'd have to adapt them a bit, but you could use them in other areas.
Thanks.
Did you have to develop a plat for the ecology monitoring sites, and if so, how did that go?
Yeah, Anthony, the question was whether or not you had to develop a QAP for the vegetation monitoring.
No, we haven't. They did not ask for that. They might in the future, but they have not. They've yet to.
Cool. Well, looks like we're about out of time. If you're staying in the Riparian track, the next session is in the theater, I believe. It's a crossover section. So thank you, everybody, for coming. Appreciate your time. Thanks, Anthony.
Hey, thank you guys.